So we are almost a third of the way through 2024, and this year is going by so quickly. Excuse that. So I thought I would do a little film about the best books of 2024 so far, because it has been an absolutely incredible year of reading. Hi, my name is Kim, and welcome back to my channel. If I am new to you, welcome, and I am a lover of literary fiction. I also follow the Booker Prize, the International Booker, the Women's Prize, and Panda Reads. And 9 times out of 10, my best books of the year are heavily influenced by those prizes because I tried to read all of the long lists. All right, so let's get going to the books. What are you guys doing? So I have 10 books and a couple of side notes to talk to you about today. So I'm going to go in order of books that I read in terms of dates. And my first 5-star read, not that I attribute a lot to the system, the 5-star system, but these are all stellar books that I would highly recommend to you. The first one I read, and it took me a good portion of January in which I DNF'd, I think, over 9 books in order to get to this book, is Elena Nose by Claudia Pinera, and it's translated by Frances Riddle. This was shortlisted for the International Booker 2022, and I couldn't put this book down. This book has been talked about a lot. I didn't get to it in 2022, and I was really trying hard to find a book that would just kickstart 2024 with a bang, and this one nailed it to a T. So this is always a no spoiler reviews unless I tell you, so today will be all no spoilers. And I really loved all of the characters in this book. It is told from the main perspective of Elena, who is battling a disease with her body, and she has to carefully time out her medication in order to navigate the world. Her daughter has been found dead in the church belfry, and she wants to get to the reason why. And she is convinced that her daughter has been murdered, but everybody else thinks that there was a different reason for it. I thought that this was compelling. It was well written. It was extremely well paced. There was a twist at the end that I didn't see coming, and I really enjoyed the way that Claudia Pinero highlighted and articulated the complicated relationships and Elena's perspective and how she dealt with the world. There's a little bit about, if you have triggers around the medical industry's attitudes, negative attitude towards women's health care, this may not be for you, and I don't think that's a spoiler. But excellent book. So that's the first out of 10. Now, this book was so good that I did purchase, and I do own a copy of Elena Nose. Thank you to my editor for putting up the book cover. We are just finishing renovations. The books are packed away, and I'm just about to start unpacking them, but that's for another day. But I did enjoy her so much that I purchased A Little Luck by Claudia Pinera, translated again by Frances Riddle, and I'm really hoping to get to this shortly. I purchased it in hope that it was going to be longlisted for the International Booker, but sadly it wasn't, but that's a discussion for another day. So the second book that I read this year that was definitely a 5-star read was The Future by Catherine Leroux and translated from the French by Susan Uro. This was the winner of Panda Reads, and I, not to toot my own horn, but I was really hoping it would win, and it did. So this is dystopian. It's a little bit of magic realism, which I am a big fan of, and there's a lot of books that I will be talking to you about that have an element of magic realism, but I think that a lot of that has to do with that this is finally a genre that is getting some hype and being talked about and loved. It's a little bit about climate change. So it is about what would happen if Detroit was kept as a French population and never surrendered to the U.S. So it is set in Fort Detroit, I believe, And it is surrounded by the US who are encroaching. It is falling apart. Everything is in rubble. People are experiencing poverty. There's a lot about climate change. And it is set with Gloria, the main character, who returns to the house of her murdered daughter in order to search for her grandchildren, her granddaughters who have disappeared. And it is absolutely so well done. I couldn't put this book down. I really like the way that the kids who have gone to Park Rouge and created their own community slowly begin to integrate with the community, the shattered community of the adults. It's beautifully told. There are amazing interconnected images. The theme of water is fantastic, and you should definitely keep a watch for that. So please get to this lovely Canadian-French author as soon as you can if you haven't already. So number 3, and I wavered as to whether or not I should list this because technically it's a reread, but I'm not counting it as a reread because I read it last year but didn't put it down on Storygraph or in any of my book notes, which is uncharacteristic of me. And I picked it up and I kept thinking, this reminds me of something, this reminds me of something, and I couldn't figure out what it was reminding me of until I got to the last chapter. And the last chapter, I'm like, oh, I've read this short story before. And I scoured through everything because this book does really read like interconnected short stories. And it turns out that I read Mild Vertigo by Miko Kanon, translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. And for some reason, it just didn't make my top books of last year and completely escaped my radar. So I'm going to count this as my 3rd choice for the best books of 2024 so far. This really has echoes of The Vegetarian by Han Kang, in that that narrative is all about one woman, and it's only told from the perspective of the people around her who are often abusive, and you never get to hear her own voice. This is about Nasumi, who is a housewife, and you do get to hear her voice a little bit, but there's a lot of reflection from the characters around her, and not in a very nice way. It also reminded me of Elena Ferrante, and not the My Brilliant Friend series, which is 5 stars. It's the 5-star series for me, and people really love or hate it. I love this. I would highly recommend it. But I would think that this has more remnants of her shorter books and Troubling Love. And all of these are translated by Anne Goldstein, as well as The Lost Daughter. And The Lost Daughter turned into a Netflix series. And while it is amazing and wonderfully done, and love Olivia Colman, I had a heart-stopping, gasping moment because, and this won't give anything away, in this series, they changed the last sentence of the novel, which completely changed the entire narrative, and I didn't like it. I would also recommend The Days of Abandonment, and the reason why I'm bringing all these up in reference to Mild Vertigo is because these will rip your heart out in a way that Mild Vertigo will do the same thing. All right, so on to the 4th 5-star read, and I picked this one up because I thought it would be longlisted for the Women's Prize this year. It was not, but everyone who read it had amazing things to say, and it just sort of ticked all the boxes for me, and that is Pet by Catherine Chigdy, and who is from New Zealand. So it's nice to see authors from down under, and it is a psychological thriller. Now, the only thing that this had going against it for me is that it's told from the perspective of a 12-year-old, and most times that just shuts things down for me because I don't find things believable. Not that you need to find things believable, but I think it's really hard to do well. Catherine Chigdy does this, excuse pet shenanigans, does this so well. If you have triggers around bullying don't read this book, because this is a lot about being bullied, about turning into a bully, about the effects that it has on you growing up, and the psychological abuse that adults in the position of power can have over kids. And this was so well paced, and it was so well drawn out in terms of the narrative that it just kept building suspense and tension, but weaved in and out of all three different characters in terms of their background and what they were going through. And there is a twist at the end that is so well done, and I didn't see coming. So if you're looking for a psychological thriller, get to this one because it's amazing. And now we're going to get into the International Booker. As you can see from this, a lot of books have been influenced by the Women's Prize, and particularly the International Booker, which I am so in love with this prize, as you can probably tell from the name of my channel. So number 5 is Crooked Plow by Inamur Vera Jr., translated from the Portuguese by Johnny Lorenz. And this is a debut novel, and it also has elements of magic realism, which works so incredibly well. And let me tell you, what a beautiful cover. I just think that this is so lovely. So this is about subsistent farmers in Brazil who are living in poverty and essentially enslaved. It starts off with 2 sisters who are drawn towards this magic knife that their grandmother is hiding from them, and the sort of horrific events that happened. And it's all said in the opening of the book, so I don't think it's a spoiler at all. But this is multi-generational. It goes through from the grandparents to the 2 sisters to their children. And it is haunting and harrowing and filled with tension, but the characters are powerful onto themselves and powerful onto their communities. And the women are so particularly strong. I thought that this was incredibly well done. Now, it took me a long time to get through this book because it's largely a good, I would say 2/3 of the book is about one sister. And I got to like the last 60 or 70 pages, and I thought there's no way they're going to be, he's going to be able to tell the sister's story in the same way that they told the first sisters. And I was so heartbroken over this that it actually like sat on my little shelf where I read for probably, I don't know, 15-20 days before I had the heart to pick it up and finish it off. And the ending, the second sister's tale, does not disappoint. I would highly, highly recommend this. This was shortlisted for the International Booker, and I will be having a predictions video coming out shortly. But it is one of the top contenders for me. So beautiful, beautiful book. Thank goodness the International Booker exists. Now, the next book, number 6, is Not a River by Selva Amada, translated by Annie McDermott. It's from Argentina, and another stunning cover. And this one, too, is shortlisted for the International Booker. And if you do read it, make sure that you read the translator's notes at the end, because it is stunning, the work that this translator has done. Not to, this isn't a spoiler because it's just a translator's notes, but she talks about how people from Argentina have a hard time reading this book in their language because she is so nuanced in terms of the dialect and the different terms that people use. That there's a lovely little note about when, that's Wednesday, the cat, sorry, she's climbing. There's a lovely little scene in the translator's notes where all of her translators have met up at this conference and start talking, and then the author comes along and they have this lovely interaction. Anyways, totally worth reading. This book starts off with three men on a river who are reflecting back on a very violent event that they experienced a couple of years ago. It is about a small community. It is about motherhood. It is about daughterhood, friendship, and it just weaves in and out and is very haunting and is absolutely beautifully written. So Annie McDermott, kudos to you, because this is absolutely stunning, and you must have gone through extraordinary measures to produce something so beautiful. So the next one is The Details by Aya Genberg. It is translated by Kira Jofson, and I listened to it on audio by Julie Maisie. Now, this was shortlisted for the International Booker, and I did not pick it as one of the shortlist contenders, even though it was a 5-star read for me, and even though I wanted to include it, because I really didn't think that it incorporated the International Booker's theme of a personal struggle through political turmoil, to sum things up really shortly. But it is beautiful, and it was a joy to experience through an audiobook. It's only a 4-hour long audiobook. I will probably re-listen to it before the International Booker is announced. And it is about a woman who is reflecting back on 4 different relationships in her life. And it is quiet and understated, and talks about the day-to-day life in such a beautiful way. I was breathtaken by it, and would literally, I listen to audiobooks while I'm driving or doing chores. I literally stopped and sat down and picked up my knitting and listened to the book, because it just needed my 150% attention to the amazing quality of writing and the stories that she was telling. So the next one is another work in translation that didn't make the International Booker, although I don't know if it qualified this year. My physical book club did this, and this is Greek Lessons by Han Kang, who I mentioned before, who wrote The Vegetarian, and is translated by Deborah Smith and Emily Ye Wan. I haven't read her poetry book. I believe it's called White Nights. It's called The White Book. But she is a poet, and you can tell in this book. So the main plot is around 2 people. It's about takes place in Seoul, and it's about a young woman who is attending Greek lessons in order to learn the language, but she has lost her voice. And on the other spectrum of that, her Greek professor is losing his eyesight. And it weaves back and forth in terms of their meeting and their forming a relationship, and they're reflecting back on the trauma that is their lives while they're pushing forward to try to recover and recuperate. And the way that Hong Kong weaves losing your voice and not being able to speak, to being able to speak a different language, but then not being able to see. And the imagery in this is stunning. The writing is beautiful. I highly recommend it. And I don't normally like covers with faces on, but I think that this is really, really well done. So that is number 8. Number 9 was a complete surprise to me, and I almost didn't buy this book, and I'm so happy I did. I don't think it's available in Canada yet. I had to import it from the UK, and I ordered it because it made the women's prize, and I was slightly intrigued, but here's what put me off. So it is In Defense of the Act by Effie Black, and it is a book about suicide, which turned me off. Which also turned me off with this pink cover, and the fact that there's a pill on it, which I find insensitive about a book about suicide. And the font is just absolutely horrible. And there are some mistakes in the printing of this book as well. But once you get past all of these things, this, and just like what happened last year. So last year, the International Booker was announced. The first book I read from it was The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, translated from the French by Daniel Levine Becker. And that book was my best book of last year. And I was so upset that it didn't make the shortlist, let alone win, that I am still talking about it a year later. It is a book that I missed out on social events. I didn't cook dinner for my husband. It is a thriller that is done in a literary way that I have never ever seen before. Go get to it. This is giving me those kind of vibes. I looked at this book. I didn't think I would like it. Thought it was way too different. I read the opening scene, and oh my God, it has one of the best opening scenes of a book I have ever read. The imagery in it is absolutely stunning. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the best book ever. And then she went into a lot about the science of suicide, because it's told from the perspective of a woman who is studying suicide. And I thought, oh, I don't know. But wow. And I had to slowly read this because it is so compassionately done around talk about suicide in such a way that hasn't been done before. It's a little bit like some of the books from last year, like Boulder by Eva Baltasar, translated by Julia Sanchez, does, about talking about motherhood in a very uncomfortable but realistic way. And the way that the structure in this book is also very interesting. It goes back and forth from chapters in which how she's feeling, like a failure, and then to every other chapter is called a black day. And this compels the narrative forward in such an interesting way because it builds tension but slowly unfolds what this black day is, and it all culminates at the end. And no spoilers again, but there is the scene in the beginning is echoed in this imagery at the end in such a way that still gives me goosebumps. To me, the main character and the characters around it were so realistic that I really felt that this was a memoir. That's how well done it is. And this is a debut novel. And I certainly hope that Effie Black is out there writing right now, because the world, and particularly me, needs more by her. If you have triggers of suicide, please don't read this book. This is heartbreaking. This is a very, very hard book to read, but it is absolutely worth it if you can get through it. It will, like a lot of the Elena Ferrante books that I mentioned before, will tear a piece of your heart out. But this is a book that I, like The Birthday Party from last year, that I keep thinking about and cluing more things together and thinking, oh, wow, that was how she did that. And oh, wow. So, I'm making all those little fine connections. So this is definitely a book that I want to read again, and absolutely will. So if you, and this didn't make the Women's Prize shortlist. So disappointing. It is what it is. I'm not a judge, so I respect their choices, but what a shame. Please support this author. Go buy the book. Request it from your library. It's amazing. It will break your heart, but you won't ever stop thinking about it. So my 10th book on this list, and final one, is one that I haven't finished yet, but I highly suspect it will be a 5-star read. And I have read her book that won the Booker, The Gathering. And it is The Wren by Anne Enright. And I have to tell you, every time I see a booktuber covering this book, there is a different cover. Ugly, ugly, ugly cover. And I don't think I've seen a stunning cover by The Wren. There's one orange one that isn't bad. But this is a library book which I'll be returning. I don't own it. But so far, I am absolutely enjoying this book. The writing is very subtle. Again, it deals with motherhood. It's told from the main perspective of Nell, who is the daughter of Carmel. And Carmel has a very famous poet father who walked out of their lives at an early age. And so it's definitely a multi-generational tale. And it skips all over the place. So it goes back and forth from when Carmel was a young girl with her sister, to Nell as a young woman, to Nell as an adult. And it's incredibly done. I believe she wrote all the poetry herself, and the poetry is lovely. And it's just weaving, it's the plot and the characters and the imagery is just so subtly weaved through that it's breathtaking. It's taken me forever to get through this book because I am reading it so slowly because I feel like I'm going to miss something. This very much gives me Elizabeth Strout vibes in terms of being able to talk about daily life in such an impactful and meaningful way. So I will get back to you when I finish that book, but I highly suspect it's going to be a 5-star. I can't see why it wouldn't. So those are my 10 best books of 2024 so far. Please tell me in the comments below what you're reading. Have you read any of these books? What are some of your top books of 2024? Are you reading the International Booker? Are you reading the Women's Prize? And please like and subscribe and click on that bell for video notifications. It really helps out my channel and I appreciate it. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.